Devil May Cry shows its age, but still holds up very well. Basically, it's a lot like any other Devil May Cry. Classic hack and slash action. You advance through missions beating enemies as they come, using an arsenal of weapons and skills that slowly grow over the course of the game. Also, there is some element of exploration that the game rewards with hidden objects and secret missions that can grant you extra rewards. You start with a simple sword and a pair of pistols, which are often more useful for getting combos and doing damage, but soon you get Alice, or a straight upgrade from your blade that lets you activate Devil Trigger, a temporary super mode that makes you stronger, regenerates your life, and allows you to pull off some special moves you'll have to buy with the game's main currency, red orbs. How do you get red orbs? Some of them you just find through the levels in plain sight, others you get from breaking apart things, and at times you'll find some hidden around the stages, but most of them come from the enemies. Whenever you kill one, you'll get red orbs. The higher your combo is when you get the finishing blow, the more red orbs the enemy will drop. Combos are ranked from D to S. The same ranking system used at the end of every mission to decide how many extra orbs you get. Mission ranking is based on the amount of orbs you've collected and the time it took you to complete the stage. This means for the best rankings you need to play as fast as possible while killing enemies with Silas combos. Although keeping Silas up would mean you already are playing fast most likely, because combos in this game end very quickly under normal circumstances. There's little room for error and you can't waste any time when fighting if you don't want to lose that S. Contrary to the timing, Dante feels rather slow. If you're more used to similar games that came later like Bayonetta, Metal Gear Rising, Devil May Cry 4 and 5, or even Devil May Cry 3, that doesn't mean you'll feel impotent against enemies. Dante is athletic enough with his movements and he hits strong. I never felt like enemies were too fast for Dante's movements and the controls didn't feel clunky. It doesn't take long to get used to this slower fighting style. The camera on the other hand does get annoying at times, especially against certain bosses. But that's not the only thing that feels different. It's a pretty known fact nowadays that Devil May Cry started development as a Resident Evil game, and that might be a reason for the game's setting. Progress is divided in missions, but most of them take place in the same area, a huge castle that gets bigger as you advance through the story and unlock access to more of it. You even get a map to check all the rooms and see where you're meant to go. However, most of the time it's intuitive, so you won't need to open it to reach your goal. The castle itself has an eerie atmosphere that the game leans on to build up to your first encounter. You spend the first minutes of gameplay alone. There's not much going on, but you can tell something will happen, with the music letting you know that someone other than you lurks the halls, and it's close. Eventually, the other shoe drops, and from there on it's a kill-all-you-can buffet. Devil May Cry is an action game after all. It gives you enemies to fight like they're on sale. You usually don't fight many enemies at once, but when you're not fighting a mandatory battle, new enemies can spawn to replace the ones you killed almost immediately, and there's a big stock of them, so clearing out a room can take a while, especially if the room has lower tier enemies. And if you leave the room and come back in, it'll be filled with demons again, although some rooms sometimes have alternate counters that come at random. There is a lot of closed spaces that aren't so big, which helps make even the small groups feel dense. If you want to, you'll rarely be not fighting. As for the enemies, there is a good variety of them with interesting designs, a wide array of attacks, and their own strengths and weaknesses that encourage you to try different strategies and loadouts against them. The most basic enemies, the marionettes, deserve a shoutout. They slice and dice, they do spin attacks, they throw their weapons, they can scream to knock you back or hold you in place and give other enemies a chance to strike, they sometimes block your attacks, but only the red ones do it, and in rare cases, they'll come at you with a shotgun. Despite being fodder demons, they felt fun to kill long past their introduction. That applies to different extents with the majority of enemies. Learning the enemies' moves, their strengths and weaknesses, and finding better strategies to take them out feels rewarding and makes the game feel all the more fun, with two exceptions. I don't like fighting sins and deaths, both of their variants. Sins are more annoying than anything when you learn to counter them, but they're incorporeal, so they like getting inside walls and make you waste time when they can, with the silver lining being you can one-shot them and it feels satisfying to pull it off. Deaths on the other hand I despise. They're just as incorporeal and much better at blocking your attacks, so the only consistently effective strategy that doesn't chip away at their health, as far as I know, is to jump and do a diving attack. So my battles against them would boil down to me using only Helmbreaker until they drop dead. I already mentioned Dante has a variety of moves and weapons, but going a bit more into detail, I have to say when it comes to your melee weapons, or devil arms as they're actually called, it feels as if you only have two and a half maybe. This is because most of your weapons are swords that act like variations of each other rather than their own thing, even using the same animations. As a result, you have Alistair, a downgrade and a sidegrade of Alistair, and Ifrit. That doesn't mean the two big devil arms are bad. Swinging swords is fun. Alistair is no exception to it, and when you go into Devil Trigger, Dante becomes a speed demon. To add to it, after you buy the right skills, he can take flight and turn into a literal demon that bomb rushes enemies and rains down thunder on them. On the other hand, Ifrit is pure power, throwing punches, kicks and uppercuts to do massive damage, which is always good in my books. And in Devil Trigger you get even stronger and can do special fire-based attacks. Also this very fast combo that looks cool to do. My only complaint is Meteor overrides Magma Drive, meaning once you buy the former, you can't do uppercuts in Devil Trigger anymore, unless you start the uppercut outside Devil Trigger and then transform before the fist hits. Maybe I'm nitpicking, but I don't think skills should override each other unless they're upgrades. As for the guns, they all feel unique and useful and have their times to shine. For example, Ebony and Ivory are perfect for juggling enemies in the air to raise your combo or keep you off the ground longer to help you dodge certain attacks, while the shotgun can do serious damage up close, knock enemies away to keep them at bay, and leave them on the ground exposed for strong attacks. However, the needle gun should not be with the others in the inventory when you can't use it, because for most of the game all it can do is make you waste some seconds whenever you select it by accident trying to take a different one. Some of the skills you can buy are pretty expensive, especially if you want to buy items. Maybe you can live without buying any recovery items and only get the limited blue orbs you find as you play. But purple orbs are exclusive to the shop and they increase your maximal Devil Trigger duration, which is also very useful. Chances are you won't get everything in your first playthrough unless you spend a good while grinding red orbs or get an S rank on every mission, but you probably won't do that in the first time around. I think the best thing you can do in your first ever run is to simply do your best and not worry about missing things by the end of the game, as there are harder difficulties to get them. Ignoring easy automatic mode, which I will mention a bit later, difficulty in Devil May Cry is fixed in your first few playthroughs. You'll start at normal and move to hard mode after beating the game, similar to Ratchet & Clank's challenge mode. Only after you've beaten the game in the second run will you be allowed to choose your difficulty upon making a new game. I prefer when games let you choose the different modes from the start, with only the hardest mode as unlockable maybe. But as I went through hard mode, I was surprised it managed to change my mind in this case. The progression from normal to hard is really good. After an only slightly tougher first stage, the challenge picks up from normal's finale and keeps scaling at a good pace. Its mission keeps getting harder to fight, because it doesn't only rely on making demons do more damage, it also changes their formation so late game monsters will appear sooner and more often, many times replacing weaker ones and giving them more time to shine. This forced me to learn to get a better grasp of Dante's techniques and weapons, and I never felt the difficulty curve got too steep with the exception of Mission 10, Canyon of Mist, where I actually stopped to grind to buy a skill I didn't have. A few times the game got frustrating, but it was a sort of frustration that gets you motivated to keep going and improve, so when you finally win, you are on top of the world. The good combat is of course a big part of the reason, but it's also because the game is short and straight to business. A normal playthrough will last you 3 to 5 hours, and if you skip what cutscenes you get, you have a game that's mostly action with little to interrupt it unless you want to go out of your way to do so. However, I do say there is little, not nothing. There are a few moments in the game where you do platforming challenges. They're very simple, but the camera and the controls make it somewhat clunky, and overall I felt very indifferent to them. Changing difficulties doesn't affect them in any way either, so they're always equally mediocre. You also seldom do these underwater sections that might be the most boring part of the game. They restrict your arsenal and your movements, making combat a mindless exercise in button mashing without all the things that make regular combat entertaining. These ones do get affected by the difficulty setting, but they don't get any better. That aside, I felt like hard mode is what really helped me appreciate the game. The rewards you get for beating it are fine too, but the act of playing and beating the game were the better reward in itself to me. The mode after hard, Dante Must Die, is a different matter though. Enemies don't get stronger by default, but they do get more health, and they can enter Devil Trigger themselves, which is enough of a game changer to make battles more tense and provide a challenge for people that have gotten all the upgrades, yet I wasn't that thrilled to keep going. I managed to beat the first boss, and from what I saw the difficulty progression still had a good curve. I'm confident I still could have beaten the whole thing with more effort, but in the end it felt like an extra to me, and after 2 playthroughs in a row I had my share of the game. Then later, while replaying normal mode to get footage for the video, I accidentally saved over my Dante Must Die file, meaning if I want to play Dante Must Die, I'd have to beat the game on hard again or start without anything, which is a challenge that I don't fancy, but you can do it if you want, and it's cool that it let you do that. On the opposite side there is easy automatic mode. I haven't tried it, but from what I've read, it's what you'd expect from an easy mode. it makes things less hard, although it also automatically finishes your combos, which I think goes against the point of being an action game if it does part of the action for you. Still, I'm fine that there's this option for people who are not as good or want to have a more chill experience, but I'm not okay with the way you unlock it. You need to do bad enough in one of the first 3 levels, which I find unnecessary. Unlike hard mode, this obviously isn't designed to be the next step after normal, so having to play normal to get it doesn't convince me. Maybe it's unsure you only play easy if you really can't beat the game on normal, which makes sense, but still if it were up to me I would have made it available from the start. And they could have put that image that explains the mode after you first select it. But well, it's not that big a deal, and it only asks you if you want to switch once, and then leaves you alone. Unlike Metal Gear Solid 5, which really likes to ask if you want a chicken hat. I'm not good and I die a lot, but if I wanted the hat I would have said yes the first time. Long story short, the gameplay is fun, tough but fair, and hard to master. Also, you can have 2 health bars. You don't see that every day and I like it for some reason. But as a final note, I don't like how the game deals with items when you use a yellow orb. Yellow orbs are like checkpoints. If you die, you use up 1 orb and in exchange rewind to back before you enter the room you died in. You'll have the weapons you were wearing equipped, even if during the battle you change them to something else. But the items you've consumed won't be there anymore. So if you use holy water and then died, you get to retry the battle from the start, only this time you don't have the holy water. So I might as well just reload my game and do the entire mission because I prefer to wasting valuable items for nothing. Missions aren't that long anyways. I eventually decided items were a last resort thing that should only be used when out of yellow orbs, and didn't bother spending red orbs to buy yellow ones except for the final boss. Now moving to the story, it all starts with some very short exposition about a war and a noble demon called Sparta who stood up for the humans and fought against his own kind during the war. Jump forward 2000 years later and we meet Dante, son of Sparta and demon hunter extraordinaire. He lost his mother and brother to demons and is determined to avenge them. On that day he is visited by a strange woman named Trish who asks him to go to Malay Island and stop Mundus, king of the underworld. He was originally sealed by Sparta, but now he's back and is trying to open a portal in the island to enter the human world and take it over. So Dante and Trish go to the island and that's where the game begins. It's less than 5 minutes of cutscenes to set up the conflict. After that the story sort of takes a backseat. Until you get near the end of the game there's no exposition, not much in the way of cinematics, if we don't count the little animations when gates close and open and such, and the game is light on dialogue. Most missions don't have a cutscene at the start or end, and what cutscenes they show are mostly short introductions or endings to boss battles, where they exchange some words with Dante to help make them feel more important than regular demons. Devil May Cry isn't a narrative masterpiece, the story is on the simple side. You can find a little bit more of information on the setting and the villains by examining some parts of the castle, but it won't be much. This game simply doesn't have a complex story, but that's not a bad thing. Let's compare this game to the movie Commando, one of the greatest action films of its era. In it, Bennett is bad, Joe Matrix is good, and he's ready to take out as many bad guys as he needs to kill Bennett and rescue his daughter. The story is nothing complex, but it doesn't need to be. Because in the end, what matters most is seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger kick ass while looking cool and hearing all the one-liners that the different characters deliver. So it's something similar here. Devils are bad and Dante is good. And Dante is a fun character to watch. He's one of the best things of the game. From what I see and remember, fans are pretty fond of him, and I see why. Being brief, he's just cool. He's strong, resilient, has magical demonic powers, and he's constantly confident, but never does it come as arrogance. He's always ready to fight, often throwing some banter before and after, yet he knows to drop the act when the situation calls for it. He's all around a charismatic man. There's a bit of cheesiness to his dialogue when he gets serious, but personally I didn't find it a problem myself. It involves talking about the ending, so I'll leave it for later because of spoilers. The other characters, they're not as good sadly. Most of the villains have little to talk about, with only one of them really being interesting story-wise. Although the majority of them have one memorable scene related to them and their designs are cool. Much like the story, their characters do their job, with the battles they have against you being the bigger deal, and I don't think any of these battles are bad in themselves. They range from okay to good. Then there's the big cheese Mundus, who is better than the rest, but since he has no screen time for most of the game, he lacks some presence and he's sort of forgettable until the end. But once he actually makes his introduction, I admit he's fine. Not the best, but still good. He does have an imposing presence and feels like a believable threat. He also gives some good reasons to dislike him. In a good way, of course. He's the villain after all, nothing wrong with a bad guy who's so bad you want to beat him up. Then there's Trish. She's the most underwhelming. She gets more development than the bosses, but she's still lacking since she's clearly a bigger character. I'll explain more right now, but first I gotta end the spoiler-free section. I really recommend Devil May Cry 1 if you haven't played it and you like hack and slash games. And what the hell, if you're a Devil May Cry fan who hasn't played it in a long time or got introduced with a later title and never looked back, you can also play it too. It's a fun game. It's easy to come by these days thanks to the HD collection that's on more modern consoles, and even on PC. It's mostly the same with better video quality, brighter lighting, a thicker life bar, and an option to have subtitles for everyone. Also, as a last minute addition to this video, I gotta mention the visual effects. Some of them have been changed or taken out completely, and while I don't think it's the most important part about the game and it doesn't spoil the gameplay experience in any way, I know there are people who care about it. People who may want to play the game as close to the original as possible, so it matters in the sense of translating the game to HD and how well it does that. Anyways, let's get back on track. The control scheme is also different, even in PlayStations, but the biggest change is the difficulty. Outside of Japan, the stats are tweaked to make things harder, but the HD versions apparently change the stats back to the original Japan values. So if you want a harder challenge above all else, the PS2 version is what you should go for, as long as it's from the USA or Europe. But overall the HD versions seem like pretty good ports. Also, you might not want to stay idle in the main menu for too long, because it plays a video that you could argue spoils a few surprises. And that's the end of this video if you want to avoid the spoilers. From here on, I'm not holding back, so hope you've closed the video if that's not okay with you. Okay, the ending. The Underworld as a final area is a cool idea, but I wasn't interested by the execution. It's mostly a fleshy cavern with barely interesting visuals. Out of 3 missions taking place there, one is around 5 minutes and the other 2 missions taking place there are focused on the bosses. You don't fight many enemies, and while they're strong, I expected more of the final stretch. The most noteworthy obstacle are the tentacles, a pretty uninteresting addition for this last area. They're annoying, but not so much to be bothered by them. It's really like, eh. The true bosses are a mixed bag. Nightmare 3 is a beast to take on. His attacks are relentless, he's almost constantly throwing stuff at you. The gimmicks of making you refight all bosses get Siren fast on retries, even if it's nice taking a chunk of Nightmare's life that way. And the core mechanics that stay through all 3 battles can make this final one extra painful. But its moveset is pretty wide, and it felt good to slowly getting better at dodging all the different attacks. And if you get hit by most of them, you take enough damage that it's punishing, but there is room for error before you die, even under harder difficulties, unlike Nello Angelo, whose challenge depends in great part on his massive damage per hit. Its second phase at the end of the battle after you kill it is not so fun, however. Mundus is decent in his first phase. Flying through space is cool in concept, and Mundus has a wide variety of attacks, but the shoot-em-up action isn't as exciting as hacking and slashing in this game. Also, you don't fire as fast when holding the fire button as you do when you mash, so you will be button mashing if you want to get through it fast. If you get a game over, you'll have to go through this section again, and the second phase can crash you very fast if you're not careful, so it can be pretty annoying to go through the shoot-em-up over and over for a chance at the second phase. As for the second phase, it's awesome to take on Mundus in an actual physical fight. He's huge and imposing, but you can get up to his face and slash at him wildly, which is neat. And so is getting to use Sparta's otherwise non-existent devil trigger during the battle. Although you can't use any other devil arms, which takes away some options for you. And it's also dragged down by having to do platforming during the fight. It's hard, but not in a fun way. And it's worse than the average platforming challenge in the game, because here failing a jump punishes you very badly by making your health drain at the speed of sound. The parts where you have to destroy orbs before he absorbs them feel clunky too, because the targeting system gets in the way. Often I ended up pointing at the wrong target and missed some of his spheres. So I can't say Mundus is the best boss. I find it has some really entertaining aspects I don't agree with, but at the same time it has good things going for it and it does feel like a proper final battle. Not too shabby, but it's also not the boss I look up to fighting the most. Then when you're done with him, the entire escape sequence reminds me of Resident Evil 2 with a countdown as you make your way back through the map and culminating in a boss battle against a boss that slowly advances towards you for an instant kill, yet is barely an actual threat and ends up dying in a blink of an eye. I don't really see this rematch with Mundus as the final boss, although it kinda is. Just one extra battle before everything ends. Well, except for the part where you pilot a plane, which is pretty lackluster but nothing particularly annoying or bad, and it goes by fast. The music as you backtrack is good. Weird title though. All of the music in the game is pretty nice. When I think of Devil May Cry's soundtrack, what usually comes to my mind are the battle tracks from DMC3 with lyrics. but the original has some gems that deserve love too, like Bloody Bladder and Super Pubic Enemy, and both versions of Ultraviolet, but to a lesser extent, because I think Ultraviolet is not as forgotten as the rest of the soundtrack. So that leaves us with Trish. Trish as a character doesn't really come off as that interesting to me. Some ideas I like, such as her being made to resemble Dante's mother by Mundus, probably to make Dante trust her, and I do like her little exchange at the end when she's like, 5 minutes should be plenty, but that's not enough to make me, the player, care about her. Although I don't think there's anything romantic going between her and Dante, they do have a strong bond, yet we don't get to see it because Trish decides to buzz off as soon as they step into Malay Island, and he's gone for most of the game, so at most, they bonded on the way to the island and we got to see nothing. If this relationship was more developed, then the reveal that she's actually working for Mundus would be more impactful, as would be the scene where she appears to die and Dante mourns her death. This is the only part of the game I feel seriously suffers from the simple storyline. And since we're on the subject of Trish and mentioned her death, we should talk about that line. You know the one.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
I don't think it's a bad scene. Yeah, Dante's voice cracks. And the line is a bit weird and even the controller shakes when he screams light. But the delivery seems pretty heartfelt to me, and the line really isn't out of place with the rest of the game. There are other dramatic lines that may come as cheesy to some, like,
You may look like my mother, but you're nowhere close to her. You have no soul. You have the face, but you'll never have her fire.
or,
These tears. Tears are a gift only humans have.
and they're delivered in the same genuine fashion, no irony. I wouldn't want these lines taken away or changed. I like them as they are. Doesn't mean I don't find some of the jokes about the line funny. Devil May Cry may have some cheese, but it's sincerely cool and left me feeling satisfied and thinking, that was a nice game, by the time the credits rolled. The final scene with the rebranded company gives a hopeful feeling of the adventure keeps going, and hearing that music box while seeing the final results puts a nice little bow on a run. That's all I've got to say about the original game. I could give some final words about the future of the franchise, but that's pointless. There's 4 sequels, a reboot, and some supplementary material like the DMC5 manga. I might review those in the future. I know I had my eyes on DMC2, only actually replaying this one to have it fresh in my mind and compare. It just ended up giving me enough to talk about. But that's for a later video if it ever happens. So until next video, peace out and have a nice day. And by the way, if you didn't know, there's a special line at the end that you only hear if you beat it in Dante Must Die mode. Check it out, you can't die without hearing it at least once.